It's already 11:05, and this is a meeting of the electrical members with the Ombudsman, Ms. Connie Lau, JP. I would like to welcome Ms. Connie Lau, Mr. So Kam Shang, Deputy Commission Ombudsman, and Mr. Tony Ma, Assistant Ombudsman, and Mr. Frederick Tong, Assistant Ombudsman. The purpose of the meeting was for the Ombudsman to brief members on the work of the Ombudsman's office and for both parties to exchange views on issues of mutual concern. I would like to remind members that this meeting will not covered by the Electrical Powers and Privileges Ordinance, and we would not discuss individual cases either. Item 2. Briefing by the Ombudsman on the work of the Ombudsman's office in the previous year. Paper CRM 8185/1617/01. The information provided by the Ombudsman has been provided to members. We also have minutes of the last meeting, LT paper number CRM 484/1516. And we also have the Ombudsman's Hong Kong Annual Report 2016. The annual report was tabled in Council at this meeting on the 6th of July 2016. So I'd like to give the floor to the Ombudsman to take us through the work of the Ombudsman's office in the previous year, and then I'll open the floor to questions by members. Ombudsman, Madam Chair, members, I'm very pleased today to come here together with the Deputy Ombudsman and the two Assistant Ombudsmen here to meet with you. We will report on the work of our office in the past year, and we would exchange views with you on issues of mutual concern. In 2015-16, the office received a total of 12,159 inquiries and 5,244 complaints. 5,242 complaints were concluded. In the past few years, the number of inquiries and complaints received by the office have remained steady. On average, we received 1,000 inquiries and 440 complaints every month. For pursuable complaints, we, depending on the nature of the cases and the complexity, we would deal with them by way of inquiry for investigation or mediation. In the past year, we continue to promote mediation. We try to deal with cases with no maladministration or minor maladministration by mediation, which is faster. The beauty of mediation is that it will save time, and more importantly, it can enhance communication, and we'll try to forge a consensus between the complainant and the complainee, and we'll try to resolve the problem together. Among the 3,100 cases pursued and concluded, 134 cases were resolved by mediation, 4.3%. The number is at a high level, same as in 14-15. The average handling time for mediation is 90 days, and 80% of the cases could be resolved or concluded within 1 month. The complainant and the complainee may have protracted discussions or disputes, but then through mediation, their cases could be resolved in weeks or months. Now, from our survey, over 90% of the complainants and most or all of the complainees said that the mediation could achieve the purpose they desired, and most of the respondents felt that they are happy with the service of our mediators, and we're very encouraged. And in 15-16, 88.4% were concluded by inquiry, around 2,700, and same as in last year's, and around 20% of the cases. We found that there were inadequacies or deficiencies on the part of the complaint needs. With regard to the cases involving serious maladministration, we would uphold our principle and we would conduct full investigation to try to identify inadequacies of the complainees. We would also make recommendations for improvement for the complainees. In 1516, 10% of the cases were concluded through full investigation, 200 cases. Over 35% of them were substantiated, partially substantiated, or some unsubstantiated, but other inadequacies found. Going by our statistics, the top 3 causes for complaint were error or wrong decision or advice of the complainee. Second, ineffective control. And third is delay and inaction. These causes were the same as that in 1415. In 1516, among the cases concluded, 90% were concluded within 3 months. Around 12% were concluded in 3 to 6 months, while 0.4% took more than 6 months to conclude, around 21 cases. With regard to the way of complaint, as in past years, in 1516, around half of the complaints were lodged through email, including our online complaint form. Email was the most popular mode. Apart from handling complaints by members of the public, we know that the office will also conduct direct investigations of public interest or concern. We want to take a macro view on such issues to identify any inadequacies. In the last year, 8 direct investigations were completed and announced, and they covered a wide scope. In our direct investigation report, we will also make recommendations to improve various aspects of public administration. In 1516, in our full investigation and direct investigation reports, we made 227 recommendations. As of November this year, 98% of the recommendations have been accepted by the public bodies or government departments concerned, and they will be implemented duly. In the first 8 months of this year, i.e. April to November, the office received around 8,000 inquiries and 3,400 complaints. 6 direct investigations have been completed and announced, and 10 have been announced publicly and are in progress. As I said, we have completed 6 direct investigations. Well, that was the number when we prepared the submission. But then you may notice 2 years ago, the office had announced the results of 1 direct investigation and the recommendations in relation to 2 full investigations. So in the first 3 quarters of this year, the office has announced and completed 7 direct investigations this year. To enhance the public understanding of our direct investigations and also enhance transparency of our work in this area, we would develop appropriate preliminary inquiries into direct investigations so that we will be allowed to exercise our statutory power to publish the reports upon completion of the direct investigations. We envisage that in 17, we would be completing more investigations as in past years. We would be uploading all our direct investigation reports on our website and select those reports of wide community concerns for announcement at press conferences. The office will also pay attention to issues of concern, including suggestions made by members today and later. The Ombudsman's ordinance allows the office to investigate into matters or breaches of code on access to information. And last year, we created a new section on court cases on the office's website. We seek to enhance the public's understanding on their right to access information held by public bodies and government departments, and at the same time we want to provide case summaries or real-life scenarios to government departments so that they can look at it as a reference in responding to such requests. The code is applicable to government departments and some listed public organizations. For other public organizations, if they refuse requests for access to information, and if we're handling such complaints, we refer to the code and examine as a matter of principle whether maladministration is involved in their refusal to provide information. We also note that the number of complaints relating to access to information is rising. In 16-17, in the first 8 months, we received 63 complaint cases, and the number is close to the 64 cases in the whole of 15-16.
This shows that the public are now more aware of the right in information access. In the complaints relating to access to information we handle, and taking 2015-2016 as example, more than half, or 53% of such complaints were found to be substantiated that there had been maladministration. So there is indeed room for improvement in the handling of data access requests from the public. To promote the functions and jurisdictions of the Ombudsman, we work together with RTHK and produce a TV miniseries of 5 episodes called the Ombudsman 5-Minuter in April 2016. Apart from broadcasting in three television channels, the program was further promoted via digital media on buses and online social platforms. We will also produce a further series of 8 episodes named Ombudsman Special 2. As before, these stories are mostly adapted from the real-life scenarios of past cases handled by the office. We expect that the series will be aired in April 2017 to help so that the public can better understand the work of the Ombudsman. Chairman, I think that's all for my report, and we'll be happy to take questions from members. Thank you, Madam Ombudsman. 3 members have put up their hands. May I propose each member be given 2 minutes because we have another session which is about replies to questions raised by members by the Ombudsman. So in respect of the report by the Ombudsman, members may now ask questions. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you. Good morning, Connie. 2 questions. You mentioned many cases which were resolved by way of mediation. So my question is that in the course of mediation, did you engage qualified mediators, or did you follow some established procedure, or did you, mediate it according to your own, methods? And you had reports on 7 direct investigation, and in respect of each, you have some recommendations. Under the statutory powers you are vested with, what powers do you have to ensure that the departments concerned will accept your recommendations? And regarding how these recommendations are followed up going further, what would you do? Thank you for the question, Mr. Leung. Let me answer your second question. That is for the current year. We have announced the findings of 7 direct investigation, and we've also made some recommendations for the organizations and departments concerned. After we have completed these reports, another important mission of the Ombudsman is to closely follow up on whether these departments have implemented our recommendations. If they think that there are certain issues, or they are facing some actual difficulties, then they will need to give us an explanation. According to past experience, more than 90% of our recommendations have been accepted. You asked also about our statutory powers. Under the Ombudsman Ordinance, it is stipulated that an organization which is the subject of complaint, if we made some recommendations and if the organization concerned consider that the recommendation cannot be implemented or is not feasible, then in certain serious cases, the Ombudsman has the power. That is, if they do comply with our recommendations, we do have the power to submit the report to the Chief Executive, and it would be for the Chief Executive to table this report to LegCo for discussion. And on the subject of mediation, our office adopt our own would employ our own internal mediators. The mediation process will follow some established procedures on our part. We have observed that when there are minor cases which don't involve maladministration or only involve minor maladministration, then the mediation process would enable us to arrive at a consensus with the department concerned or have the issue resolved. Dr. Fernando Zhao, I'd like to thank the Ombudsman for meeting with us today. We always have we have high expectations of the work of the Ombudsman, and the public, I'm sure, also have a lot of expectations. It is not difficult to really uphold justice. So what I like to say is that in respect of the allowance for the disabled, the government has pointed out that a person would need to lose 80% of their capacity before they can apply for a disability allowance. In 2009, in the report of the direct investigation you conducted, you recommended that it should be cancelled. And the SW indicated then that it agreed with your recommendation. We're now on to 2017, and 7 or 8 years have lapsed since. But the recommendation by your office, although accepted by the department, has yet to be implemented. So I'd like to ask whether the Ombudsman's office has any means to ensure that these recommendations will be implemented in a timely manner. If the government keep on procrastinating, if they simply turn a deaf ear to your recommendation and using the excuse that there are objections and that they need to consider this further. As a result, many disabled persons are not able to receive their allowances. So how would you be able to help? Thank you, Dr. Zhang, and also thank you for your commendation of the work of our office. In this regard, we will continue to closely monitor the improvement measures to be implemented by the departments concerned. As far as we know, in respect of the review on disability allowance, it was completed in February 2016, and the Labour and Welfare Bureau also announced their findings. The Welfare Panel of the Council, at the last meeting on the 3rd of May 2016, when it discussed this issue, the Labour and Welfare Bureau indicated that they will defer the medical assessment form, the review of the medical assessment form, and they will also amend the checklist. According to that bureau, in respect of whether certain terminologies on the assessment form should be amended, there is no consensus yet. The Labour and Welfare Bureau also promised that they will provide more detailed guidelines for doctors, explaining how doctors should assess the medical, equipments and how they affect the disabled persons. So my answer is that we will continue to, monitor how the Labour and Welfare Bureau will implement those recommendations. I'm afraid you don't have much time. Perhaps you can wait for your second round. Claudia Moore. Regarding complaints regarding access to information, including the one complaint from the Journalists Association. Now, very often when you ask the government for information, they will say it's internal documents and they will not release information. You have now reminded them that internal documents is not it's no excuse for non-disclosure, and I think all civil servants should note this. Many documents are considered sensitive information or containing commercial business secrets or privacy data, and this is not desirable. Of course, you have recommended departments to, make improvements regarding access to information. I think the relevant code is not legally binding. It's up to the departments concerned whether they will give you the information. If you feel aggrieved, you can complain, and if the complaint is substantiated, the situation might improve a bit. We don't have an archive law in Hong Kong, as the Commissioner knows. So without the legal requirements, and even if the government were to scrap the information, we wouldn't know that they've done that. In your proposals regarding, say, for example, the protection of human rights, although your recommendations, the government may ignore your recommendations. We've heard of a case recently that a few years you've made recommendations, you're still being ignored. So could you really speak out and say in black and white to the government that Hong Kong indeed needs an archive law and also a law on freedom of access to information, so that you don't need to continue to deal with so many of these complaints? Thank you. I invite the Deputy Commissioner to answer the question. Thank you. The Ombudsman's Office, in relation to the improvements to the Code on Access of Information, had conducted a direct investigation 2 years ago, and we put forward a series of recommendations as to how the government can improve the implementation. We've also made reference of overseas experience and recommended that the government should set up a freedom of information legislation, and also we also conducted a direct investigation on the subject of archive law. The government accepted our recommendation. I think that was the LRC is still discussing this. Yes. So we are closely monitoring the government's follow-up actions. We still maintain our position that we need to enact such a piece of legislation. Mr. Cheng Chung Tai. Thank you. I'd like to ask a question regarding the scope of investigation. Recently, Mr. Eddie Ng, the Secretary of Education, suggested that the TSA will be, relaunched. And the Bureau said that 50 schools have received a lot of support when they decided to implement the TSA again. They also met with the parents and the Parents Alliance and said that the parents were all in full support. But I note that in your report, in similar complaints 3.4, you say that other than complaints relating to the Fire Services Ordinance and the Buildings Ordinance, the most complaints you received were in respect of the TSA. But in your entire report, I have not seen any detailed information. So regarding your direct investigation report, and also whether you would consider disclosing more information regarding cases concerning TSAs, because this is a subject of widespread public concern. Madam Commissioner, thank you. I think we all understand that the Ombudsman's office has to abide by the certain, confidentiality, provisions, which certainly we're going to disclose. But we did publish some information on the TSA, but you say you had not received you have not found any detailed information. Perhaps Mr. Ma can address that question. Mr. Chen, I'll try to answer your question.
We have received public complaints against the EDB on the subject of TSA, how they implement TSA. These are complaints, and based on the confidentiality requirement, we can't give you the details. Dr. Zhang referred to direct investigation. For the moment, we don't have that, because we understand that the EDB has a committee which has reviewed the system and has made certain recommendations. So we will observe that first and see if there is a need for direct investigation. So we are just watching over the situation. Now, for the second part, we will be covering 10 items or 12 items raised by members, and we will discuss and exchange views on those. So I think that's more or less for the first part. I have to draw a line. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, Yu Si-wing, Helena Wong, and myself, who will ask questions for the first round. Mr. Wilson also. We don't have a second round because we have to leave time for the remaining items. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, thank you, Madam Chair. We recognize the work of the office, but then we see individual cases whereby the emphasis of the investigation is really on the law, but the historical factors have been overlooked. Let me cite an example. There is a case in a public housing estate where alterations of the flats have been done. Now, if you go by the law and also the tenancy agreement, that should not be done, of course. But for some aged or old public housing estates, there are indeed alteration works. So long as the alteration works don't affect the structural safety and also don't cause a nuisance to other residents, and then you're still using this yardstick of making sure that they comply with the law, then it will make things difficult for the residents and also the housing department staff. They will be pitting against each other. So you have to strike a balance. How do you see that kind of situation? Of course, it's right that you talk about the law, but in fact, in reality, there are certain residents' behavior which do not comply with the law, but for some historical reasons, that has been in place for over a decade, and what they did do not affect other residents, and they don't what they do don't pose a hazard to structural safety. So can you be more customer oriented and try to strike a balance? Thank you for your question. I'll defer to Mr. Tong, our Assistant Ombudsman, to give you the details. When we have received a complaint, we will go to do the investigation, and our emphasis is on whether the government department concerned has maladministration. We will also look at the situation of the complainants to come up with the best way to deal with them. As I said, after we've received a complaint, we will go by different means to resolve them based on the nature of the complaints. So we very much hope that a consensus can be forged between the complainant and the complainee, and there can be a resolution acceptable to both. Mr. Tong. On Mr. Wu's question, when we investigate into a certain complaint, and our emphasis is on whether there is maladministration on the department concerned. if they have certain established procedures and requires, but then they don't comply with it, then there may be a breach or maladministration. But then certain requirements may be lacking behind the times, so we try to strike a balance. Sometimes we even recommend the department to revise certain procedures. Now, in terms of illegal works at the public housing estates, we know that the HD is already doing a review, and on this particular subject, we are already going ahead with a direct investigation, and we will announce the findings duly. Mr. Yu Siwing. On the numbers, the number of complaints, well, the figures for the past 3 years, the conclusion rate is around 85 to 86%, but for this year, it's not ended yet. You are already completing the 75% only, obviously lower than that in the past 3 years. And cases carried forward, while the number is larger, around 900 in the past, but for this year it's 1,030 cases. Is that a normal phenomenon? If it is abnormal, will it affect the work arrangement in the future? Thank you, Mr. Yu, for your question. As we said, we have a certain performance pledge, and we attach a lot of importance to the standard time for completing a case. We would also have to look at the nature of the different cases received. That will have an impact on the time required to be handled for handling. While there may be cases which are more complicated, and sometimes the government departments may be very late in responding to us. All these are factors which affect the time required to handle the complaints. I thank the member for your concern. As head of the office, I would keeping a very close watch on the time required to complete the cases. We want to fulfill our performance pledge. And that, as I said, majority of the cases can be concluded within 3 months. Our performance pledge is that the cases should be completed within 6 months. So please rest assured that I will be watching a very close watch on the situation so that the cases will not be stored in a way. Dr. Helena Wong. I welcome the Ombudsman and her team for coming here. You have an establishment of 123 staff members. Look, 65 investigators, and 3 are on the temporary terms. In terms of your case loadings, can the staff cope with more cases, or you are already very tight in your manpower? Now, if you receive more complaints in the future, you will be selecting the cases to work on. Would that be a constraint on your resources? If you really select cases to be handled, what are your criteria in your selection? We have an assessment team. The assessment team will examine whether the cases will fall within the ambit of our statutory power. So we will not say giving up on cases because there is manpower constraint. So that's has to be made clear first. Now, another part of our work is direct investigations. As you can see in our direct investigations, well, the number has been rising in the past few years. Well, when I first assumed office, there was 5 to 6 direct investigations. Last year, 8 reports, and this year, 12 reports on direct investigations. We will make sure that we have enough manpower to do our work, and we would also ensure that our reports are solid and comes with good materials. So I think we can cope for the time being. We'll try to maximize the use of our staff manpower. You've got only 2 minutes, right? We've got still 12 items to be discussed. Mr. Wilson, thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Ombudsman on behalf of the public for their work. Their work has been duly recognized by members of the public. I have several questions. First, the main departments complained against are HD, FEHD. So I would like to know the nature of the complaints. And do the government departments have come up with any concrete measures to improve the situation, to ratify the non-compliance? And also, with regard to direct investigations, on what basis would you do or initiate direct investigations? Now, once the findings have been announced, what is the follow-up work of the government departments? How do the government departments respond to your recommendations? How do they implement your recommendations? Madam Ombudsman, thank you. Whether it's the top 3 or top 10 departments complained against, it's HD and FEHD. They have a lot of liaison or contact with members of the public. So whenever we are asked by the media, we would explain to them the high number of complaints doesn't necessarily mean that they do a bad job. Well, they are in more frequent contact with members of the public, maybe hence the high number of complaints. And also the number of the complaints have to do with their daily work, the daily work of the HD and FEHD. On direct investigations, the first thing that we look at is whether this is an issue of public concern. Also, many members of the public and also legislators make suggestions on the topics for direct investigations. Now, after the findings have been announced, whether it's the full investigation coming from the full investigation or direct investigations, we would follow up very closely with the government departments on whether they implement our recommendations and the relevant progress as well. So our work doesn't stop at the time when we announce the result or findings. We will continue with our work. I would like to follow up on the matter referred to page 32 of your report. Is about leakage of water from water pipes in private residential flats. I have received a lot of complaints. Well, half of the complaints I received are on that matter. But then my observation is that, well, this problem has not been alleviated after you've done your direct investigations. I still receive a lot of complaints. I've approached the water seepage office, but I don't see any change in the way they investigate into complaints. So we don't find that the water seepage office is of any help at all. And for over half of the complaints, using by the present methodology, we wouldn't be able to identify the source of the water leakage, and the complaints can't be resolved. Well, you have done your direct investigation, but this is the reality that we're still facing. So what more follow-up work can you do to ease this long-standing problem? Second, would you be working to initiate a direct investigation on subdivided units? I've received a number of complaints. People are worried that the loading may be an issue, but the public don't think that the buildings department has been following up on the issue effectively. Thank you. Madam Chair, for your questions. Well, perhaps you can give us more information on subdivided units. We will not rule out the possibility of initiating direct investigations on why there are subdivided units and also whether there are safety issues. With regard to water seepage office and also water leakage from water pipes. Deputy Ombudsman, we are investigating into the work of the WSD. We note that the water seepage office has been complained against much, and we ourselves have received a number of complaints as well. We have approached or liaised with the buildings department and the FEHD, their joint office, and we understand that they are studying whether there is new method to identify the source of the water leakage, and they would also try to improve on their work procedures. We hope that they can improve their work after we discuss with them. Every now and then, we receive complaints on water leakage, and we will deal with each case seriously.
On the subject of water leakage, we have actually conducted a lot of mediation work. Yeah, okay. I hope you will really, take that into consideration. And with that, we can now move on to the next session, which is actually the questions raised by members. Before the meeting, we have received 12 items suggested by members, and the issues raised by members. In respect of those issues raised by members, the Ombudsman has already provided a written response. Since we are scheduled to adjourn at 12:25, and since we don't have many members present in this chamber, then I propose that we will group the 12 questions into 3 groups. We will discuss 4 topics each time, and I'll invite members to ask questions lasting for no longer than 2 minutes, and then the Ombudsman can then respond. The first question is about the issues relating to investigation report on complaints against Food and Environmental Hygiene Department for improper handling of food safety complaints. And secondly, the issue relating to wall-mounted dispensers. And thirdly, the testing of the drinking water of all public rental housing estates, again by using stagnant water samples. And fourthly, excessive lead content in drinking water. Dr. Helena Wong, I'd like to know whether you have any further follow-up questions. Members can also ask other follow-up questions, and then we can ask the Commissioner to respond. Madam Chair, I'd like to thank the Commissioner. First of all, I have raised many questions. I see that you have eliminated many of my questions, but you have selected a couple of my issues for follow-up. So that's why earlier I asked you what were the criteria according to which you decided to follow up on some of the issues and not on the others. In your reply, you say that the government is already following on those issues, and that's why you're not doing the same. What happened if the government is, adopting a delaying attitude? What would you do? Commissioner. Thank you, Dr. Wong. In our reply, we've already given our explanation. If the government is following up on the issue, and given that we don't have unlimited resources, I don't think we should duplicate the effort. But it doesn't mean that we will then forget about it. In our reply to questions raised by members, we have said that if the department concerned had already followed up and we found that there are still further issues, we would then check whether or not there is a case of maladministration. We're not trying to simply avoid these issues, but while the government is working on it, I don't think we should interfere. But it doesn't mean that our work is concluded at this stage. We will continue to closely monitor the report they publish or the findings that they come up with and see whether or not the actions they've taken are appropriate. All right, regarding the first question on food safety, we think the Ombudsman, you indicated you have already started a direct investigation. So could you give us more details? Well, I think as a result of the complaint, we found out that the vegetables were found to contain, pesticide residues, and we found that the FEHD has a different standard. So our recommendation was that they should be clearer, so that the public can have certain guidelines to decide how they should, purchase the food products concerned. At the same time, we are conducting another investigation, another direct investigation. We will be looking again at the question of how food safety is being monitored. You can rest assured that we will ask them again questions relating to this issue. Commissioner, I hope you will spend some time to check into this, because the public is very concerned about food safety. The government is only relying on the Center for Food Safety. We need someone to check whether they've done a proper job from a different perspective. I personally have found that there are many loopholes in terms of the enforcement of the law and so on. The example of hairy crabs being found to contain dioxin is another example. In Hong Kong, they will check food products for dioxin, but in the mainland they don't do that. But we're not told. And the health certificate that they issue are considered to be valid. But when the crabs arrive in Hong Kong, we found that they are found to contain excessive dioxin. So the trade and the public simply doesn't know, what exactly is happening. The Center for Food Safety said that such a self-certificate will not be acceptable in other jurisdictions, but when these hairy crabs arrive, we don't know what they have investigated across the border and whether or not their standards are comparable to our food safety standard. If the standards could be different, there would be contradictions. So I don't think we can accept such ambiguous, statements. Well, in our direct investigation, we had looked at the work of the FEHD in this regard. I agree that if, say, we have a set of safety standard in Hong Kong, and for food products from the mainland, say, or the health certificates attached with those products, these certificates must satisfy our own standard as well. So we found out that the Hong Kong government simply has no means to make sure that the mainland authorities accept our standards, and that's the source of the problem. But when these food products are imported in Hong Kong, the FEHD should play, the role of the gatekeeper. So our investigation will also cover that. We will also look into the vegetables and other food products and how the standard for pesticide residue are defined, and in the absence of a standard, then what should we do? And when you have two different sets of standards, Commissioner, you might have noticed that they very often use the term safety assessment and say you need to consume so many categories of vegetable before it is hazardous to your health. Every time they will say this, you won't die if you consume a small quantity. Commissioner, are you going to conduct a direct investigation and follow up on that? We've already initiated a direct investigation on how the FEHD, monitors food safety, including what Dr. Wong was asking. That is, how the safety standard for food products are determined, and also the system for risk assessment. Commissioner, you should be aware that there are two different sets of standards. That's already very good. Well, you need to set standards on food safety, be it pesticides or asthma, medication or antibiotics. But every time, if they say that you won't eat 20 caddies of vegetables, therefore you won't die, or you won't eat 11 hairy crabs, if you always look at it from the risk assessment perspective, then nothing will be harmful, because you won't be eating so many hairy crabs every day. If that's the approach, then Hong Kong will be like third world countries. That is, our threshold is so low that if you won't die after consuming the food product, it is acceptable. And also, would you also be looking at food products containing antibiotics and asthma drugs? For example, chicken have been found to contain, bacteria which is resistant to drugs. For example, we don't know whether the feed used in the mainland farms contain such medication. And when we consume the chicken and the fish and the pork, and since the animal have been fed with such antibiotics, then we would also be consuming such bacteria. Well, antibiotics is not included in the first four questions. But and you've already spent 8 minutes, Dr. Wong, so another member has already put up his hand. So I'll need to... How many members are present? You've already spoken for 8 minutes. Okay, I'll go for my second round then. Well, I have 4 items. So do I only have 1 minute for one item each? All right, I'll defer to the other members if they have any questions on these 4 items. If not, I'll go for my second round. I've already suggested that we will schedule to finish at 12:25. There are 12 items, and we split them up into 3 groups, each group containing 4 items. So for every 15 minutes, we deal with the 4 items. When I chaired the discussion on this session, I already, explained to you this. So I know that you all have follow-up questions. Chairman, can you use your discretion and accept a request from members that the meeting be extended if there's a need? I formally put forward this request because you are simply harrying members, you are interrupting the dialogue between members and the commissioner. We are dealing with issues of concerning public interest. You are now stopping us. I'd like to first of all point out, Madam Chair, you said you're worried that there won't be enough time. I'm telling you this. Time is in our hands. We need to manage time wisely. If need be, you can extend the meeting by 15 minutes before we can exhaust all the items. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. First of all, the Food and Health Bureau has not done a good job as the gatekeeper, and we have the incident involving the hairy crabs. So my question for the Commissioner is whether or not you could adopt a risk disclosure system. That is, when the food items are imported in Hong Kong, the importer has to make a risk disclosure. It's like the way we deal with financial products. There is a disclosure requirement. And after disclosure is a question of integrity. And if the importer is found to be in breach, then he should be sanctioned accordingly. So the vendor of the product should also be held liable. And we shouldn't just rely on the Center for Food Safety to play the role of the gatekeeper. In the Journey to the West, the pig in the story actually was a pig which has swallowed too much, drugs treating asthma, and its DNA change. Do you think my suggestion is more a better approach? Thank you. First of all, in Hong Kong, we have our own food safety standards. If the FHD or the Bureau as the gatekeeper must play its role, well, they take random checks. Other than food labeling and nutritional labeling, should they also require the risk disclosure? Do they have adopt a risk disclosure system at all? I think that should be for the departments concerned to consider. That is, for food products which are imported and sold in Hong Kong, whether they should adopt a risk disclosure regime. We can certainly relay this suggestion to the FHD for consideration.
In different countries, well, they come with different regulations on the exports. Mr. Leung, well, your time's up. Well, we are talking about seasonal products. Well, the hairy crabs is also mentioned in item 7. So let's move on to items 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's about the Yamate Fruit Market, Changsha Wan Wholesale Vegetable Market, and Changsha Wan Temporary Wholesale Poultry Market, the relocation and reprovisioning. Item 6, issues relating to the lifelong college. And item 7, issues relating to the detection of dioxin in hairy crabs. Item 8, issues relating to the regulation of Chinese herbal medicine. So I would now ask Dr. Helena Wong to ask a question. 2 minutes again, and then see if any other member wishing to ask a question. Dr. Wong. Wholesale market, Changsha Wan and Yaomate, and they have been causing nuisance to the districts. But the government has turned sites originally marked for building wholesale market to build housing. So there is no plan to relocate the Changsha Wan wholesale market and also the Yamate fruit market. If you go there at night, at midnight, you'll see that they take up all the street space and cause a very serious nuisance. And you say that they would manage the market on their own and you don't have to do anything. Is that right? In our reply, we said that for the fruit market and also the wholesale poultry market, there's been delay in their relocation. We know the government has commissioned a consultant to do a study. They are now studying the matter. We will watch closely the developments, and if there are signs showing that there is a delay, we will not rule out the possibility of initiating a direct investigation. We know that in June 2014, the government also reported the matter to the Electrical Panel on Food Safety and Environmental Hygiene, and it said that it had commissioned a consultant to study the matter and also the current functions and purposes of the wholesale business. And the government has promised to revert to the electrical panel when results of the consultancy study are available. We would watch closely the developments. On lifelong college, as we know earlier on, it was suspected of trading academic qualifications. People got a doctorate degree very speedily, and I'm pleased that you would follow up on the matter. I think the situation is in a mess. And they changed its name, and it is allowed to continue its operation, and that was already approved by the EDB. So are they still selling cheap doctorate degrees to people? Please follow up, not just on lifelong college. It has renamed itself. How come that the EDB has allowed for the name change? Has the operation changed? Well, please, Ombudsman, follow up on that. Ombudsman, Madam Ombudsman. We have received complaints from the members of the public about the advertisements and also the substandard of the programs being substandard. We have approached the EDB and asked how they monitor the situation. Well, not just on one particular college, but the overall situation. We have initiated a direct investigation. We're looking mainly on how they monitor such colleges and programs. And in the course of our investigation, we learned that certain colleges or educational institutions are falsifying certain information, enrollment date of certain students. So that would be covered under our direct investigation. So our investigation will not just be on the lifelong college, but we would adopt a more macro view. So if needed, Madam Ombudsman, I can help you with your investigation because I have certain information on hand on this particular case. We welcome information from members which can help in our direct investigation. I will liaise with you further. We'll have a question on issue item 8, Chinese herbal medicines. I'm very concerned about this. It's just like food safety. Chinese herbal, Dr. Helena Wong, I'm sorry. After you're finished with this question, I'll ask Lam Kwong to take the floor. I ask you to follow up on this. You said that if needed, you will initiate direct investigation. I would let you know why there is a need. The DH, the way it monitors whether there is pesticide residue in Chinese herbal medicine, and they would be looking at the medicine after it has been treated and fried and so on. This is a testing method unique in Hong Kong. Other countries, including the mainland, will not use such methodology, not even Taiwan. When they do the testing, they will look directly at the Chinese herbal medicine involved. Whether there is pesticide residue. They would not test for such materials after the medicine have been boiled and made into soup, because the content might have changed after that process. So if we go by that approach, the pesticide residue will be low in content. So should the administration study into whether there is excessive pesticide residue in Chinese herbal medicine, whether there is sulfur dioxide. The DH tests around 30 Chinese herbal medicine every year only, and the information has never been made public, so the public are kept in the dark, and they're doing it in a mysterious way. And for some other medicine, they don't even have a certain standards for them. And for some other herbal medicines, they've never been tested. Say, for example, honeysuckle. No test has been tested on it ever, and there are hundreds of pesticide residues found in honeysuckle. Mr. Lam Kwok Hong. Dr. Wong talked about the falsified qualifications. It has wide implications. If you exercise your public authority based on falsified qualification, then there will be dire consequences. So we have to be watching closely this. Well, on TV, you said that you talked about the application fee charged by kindergartens. Under the law, it seems that there is nothing which can be done, and you can't deal with it either. And the secretary made this remark. He said that the private kindergartens don't have to submit the financial statement, so it's difficult for the EDB to check on them. So would you ask the secretary to impose additional conditions or requirements on these kindergartens? I don't know whether there are any bacteria in what he said. I think his remark is grossly inappropriate. What do you make of it? In relation to application fee of kindergartens, in Monday we announced the results of our findings, and yesterday we know that the EDB will follow up on the matter. And the kindergartens, which have charged excessive application fee, will have to submit their income and expenditure to the EDB for vetting once again, whether so that the EDB can make a judgment on whether it's reasonable and whether there is room for reduction in the fee. He said that he would abide by the law in what he does, and according to the law, no such report can be submitted. In our report, we also said this. The EDB should take an in-depth look at the application. Maybe an application has been submitted to the EDB. The EDB is obliged to scrutinize it very carefully. And that we suggest that there should also be clear criteria on your vetting procedures. You don't necessarily have to look at the financial statements before you can do close scrutiny. Okay, let's move on to the third group. Items 9, issues relating to the problems occurred in the polling stations for the 2016 electoral election. Item 10, issues relating to the mechanism for follow-up on complaints about soil fields and illegal land filling. Item 11, issues relating to the mechanism for handling unauthorized rural developments. Item 12, issues relating to the mechanism for follow-up on complaints about unauthorized building works. We'll first ask Dr. Zheng Chong Tai, and then also Roy Kwong, 2 minutes. Dr. Zheng Chong Tai. I have a question of the EAC about the voting, the discrepancy between the voter turnout figure and the number of actual ballot papers, and also voters are producing photocopy of their Hong Kong ID cards only. But the Ombudsman's reply doesn't look sensible to me. It said that the EAC is an independent statutory body to oversee the process of election. It's more appropriate for EAC to handle the matter. The public have asked that the EAC to make public information. In early October, the Fact Wire has asked for 6 items of information from the EAC, but the EAC has turned a deaf ear to its request. So that's why I am raising this item and ask the Ombudsman to do direct investigation. So what is the criteria that you adopt for initiating investigations? We would go by what's stated in the law and the organizations covered under our ordinance, and whether there is maladministration on their part. Of course, Annex 1, it's clear, sets out that EAC is also part of the public bodies that is under your ambit. If you complain against the EAC, we would look at whether there is any problem with its administration. Remember, the 2 questions you raised are related to the fairness of the election, on whether they're just or not. Well, I think it has to do with administration. The voters just produce a copy of their ID card and vote. Isn't that an administration issue? Well, this will affect whether the election is done in a just and fair manner. Well, can I have 10 more seconds? In 2012, the Ombudsman has investigated into the vote rigging suspicion in the IT sector. But then in 2016, you are not investigating into it. I think you are practicing double standards. Are there any political reasons behind your decision not to do anything on this 2016 election? Well, there is absolutely no political consideration. Well, I'll defer to my Deputy Ombudsman to talk about the IT case in 2012. On the 2016 situation, I think it's best that the EAC deal with it first. To our understanding, after every election, the EAC would do a full-fledged review, including all also dealing with all the complaints received during the elections, and also including certain irregularities mentioned by Dr. Zhang. It will do a full-fledged review and will submit a report to the CE and also make public the report. So I think for this matter, it's more appropriate for the EAC to handle it. Mr. Roy Kwong, you can have a follow-up question. Mr. Kwong. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, on soil fields and illegal land filling, I'd like to thank the Ombudsman for its response. But what the problems that we are facing is, well, there are two things to be handled. That is the existing soft fields and also black spots of illegal land filling. Earlier on, according to certain reports, it is said that the EPD has installed a camera to take shots of vehicles which are involved, to take photos of car license plates of vehicles involved in illegal land filling, but then they couldn't catch the driver or the owner of the vehicle in 6 months. Well, that makes up a small portion of the cases, and there are even more serious cases. We don't know where they're dumping the mud and so on. And also for the existing soil fields, they are there in Tuen Mun, Lau Fao Shan, and the Tuen Mun soil field is just 1 foot away from a residential flat. Thirdly, about unauthorized building works, UBWs. You said that based on the above, it will not initiate direct investigation. But then, according to the latest report, some people have bought flats which have UBWs and they have to suffer as a result. And the buildings department has been acting slowly. So as a result, people have found out about the UBWs after they've bought the flat.
Commissioner, regarding the following up on soil fields and complaints regarding illegal land filling, I believe members are aware that we've already initiated a direct investigation, and if members have any further information, you are welcome to forward them to us. Because this can certainly assist us with in our investigation. So I'm really grateful to your raising the concern to us. Secondly, if you read our report on Monday, you would have found that after the building department had issued clearing order and the lease has not been marked. So the question whether or not there has been any delay in the clearance of the UBWs. In our complete investigation on such complaints, we have pointed out exactly that the building department has taken too long, either to clear the UBW or also creating or stipulate or adding a footnote to the lease. How many people have bought such premises and only to realize afterwards that there are UBWs in the premises? I don't believe we have such figures. We will need to inquire with the building department. Of course, we would also like to obtain such information. But I also have a follow-up question myself regarding the complaint about illegal land filling. You said that you will conduct a direct investigation. Does it include? Yeah, we will cover all types of complaints. Yeah, because we have many, complaints about illegal tipping of construction waste. Yes, you're certainly welcome to give us such information. For the second round, Dr. Wong or Mr. Cheng Chung Tai. Thank you. Let's follow up on the response made by Mr. So, the Deputy Commissioner. I think you are simply trying to evade your responsibility. You say that you say that the IEO should submit a report within 3 months. In 2012, during the electoral election, before the IEO submitted its report, the IEO and the Electoral Office already went to LegCo to respond to the queries raised by Mr. Albert Chen Wai-Yip regarding complaints about double counting of votes and so on. I don't agree that even before the IEO has submitted its report, and therefore the Commission shouldn't do anything. You have not been able to explain to us why. I mean, somebody with only a copy of the ID card and when somebody make an inquiry and lodge a complaint to the IEO, and the Ombudsman said that the complaint cannot be entertained. Deputy Commissioner, thank you. Regarding the actual operation of the election itself and whether or not there have been any irregularities, including whether there have been people using copies of ID card, be they genuine or not, and voted, we need a lot of investigation to look into that. And the IEO has a statutory role to do this and to provide the full account and the report. Under the circumstances, we don't think it's appropriate for us to intervene at this stage. Furthermore, since the IEO has its duty, when it is within our terms of reference, we believe that, well, if there's a better channel to deal with this issue, I think we should not step in. Well, I think you are also equally concerned about this. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any queries about, the poll conducted by Benny Tai. So when the IEO deals with any complaints regarding election, it might actually been guilty of maladministration, and this certainly would fall within your terms of reference. I will later on formally contact the complainant and lodge the complaint to your office. Well, if you have any specific details, you are welcome to forward them to us. Do members have any member would like to, are there any members who like to follow up on those 12 issues? Dr. Wong. Madam Chair, I'd like to follow up on issue number 2, the hot water dispenser. There are no laws regulating these wall-mounted dispensers because I've already made inquiries with all the departments concerned. So I'd like to ask the Ombudsman to, the matter is still being, is being delayed. Although the WSD has set up a working group to follow up on this. But I have asked whether, we go to restaurants and fast food stores every day, and many of these premises use wall-mounted dispensers, and even in pantries and offices, or even the hospital authority and the schools, also have these wall-mounted dispensers where we've discovered there is excessive, quantities of lead and even cadmium in the water. I've told Dr. Koh and his bureau that they should check the restaurants and check the water in those premises, and for example, inspect the hot water from those premises. Have they ever tested such water? They stubbornly refused to do that. So did the WSD. So how many restaurants actually follow the government's guidelines? I can tell you that as long as the government keeps on delaying, the members of the public will very likely be consuming water which contains excessive lead. If there are problems with the pipe connections, and if they use these dispensers and the water is heated, the water will have a high concentration of lead and other toxic materials. Why are you still not following on that? Well, I think you remember that last year we also made a recommendation, and we immediately liaised with the department and the bureau concerned about and reflected our concern. Well, as you put it, we know that they've already set up an interdepartmental working group. You may think that for some of the restaurants and the schools and not checking the dispensers, perhaps we can follow up on this with them further. Other than setting up some new standards, we will certainly follow up on some of the existing issues. Our colleagues are working closely with them, liaising closely with them, and asked them if there are any follow-up. Well, Commissioner, they are delaying, and you are allowing them to do that. We want you to help, but you're not able to do that. We would like them to go to the restaurants to take sample checks so that we can put our hearts at ease. Every time I order a pot of tea in a restaurant, I'm really worried because it has been the water has been found to have excessive content of toxic materials. Nobody will stop you from taking water samples from the restaurant to see whether there are any problems. Why won't you do that? If in the course of investigation you found that everything is in order, then we wouldn't be so worried. The public would not be so worried that their health would be put at risk. We'll certainly go back and consider that further. Okay, I think we've discussed all 12 issues. Dr. Wong, your last round. Madam Chair, my suggestion is that the Commissioner has worked so hard. She has, led her colleagues to come here to listen to us, and we all want to put things right. So I hope that we can arrange for similar meetings in the future. We only have one meeting every year. We have 70 council members. Some may not be interested. Others may be engaged with other work. So, but we have 12 issues, and every time we only have 4 minutes to discuss 4 items. We wouldn't be able to discuss anything in detail. We have 12 issues. We need to discuss the Commission's report, and we only have 2 minutes for that. And after we've spent the 2 minutes, they don't even have a chance to answer. I'd like to ask for the similar meeting in the past. Did we only schedule for 1.5 hours? Why won't we arrange for a longer session so that there could be more room for discussion? I think arranging for only 1.5 hours for this meeting has resulted in our discussion being conducted in a hurried manner, and there was no, detailed, communication. And I don't think the meeting has been very effective. Would you promise that in future our meeting will at least be for 2 hours? Well, I've heard your suggestion, and I'll certainly talk to the Secretariat to see how we can ensure that the meeting can be more effectively convened. Is it your decision or the Secretary's decision that the minute for 1.5 hours, or was it the Commissioner's recommendation? But this was the arrangement in the Secretariat. Did we also the meeting only lasted 1.5 hours, and had that been same number of issues before? Well, every meeting is different. In the past, there have been up to 9 to 10 issues, but this time we have more than 10. There are 2 or 3 more issues this time. I believe there will be more issues yet in future. So no matter what the number of issues there are and how many members are present, and you only allow for 1.5 hours, next time we may only have 1.5 minutes per issue. So there won't be time for discussion. We'll certainly take on board your suggestion, and I'm sure members can continue to follow up on those issues through different channels. So with that, I think we can now conclude our discussion, and if there are no further issues, the meeting is now adjourned.